Faith was not shaking. She had decided that the moment she turned and saw them, 3 men at her kitchen table, uninvited, expensive, patient, she would not give them the satisfaction of watching her shake. She filled the kettle, set it on the stove, took 3 cups from the cupboard with steady hands. "If you're going to sit in my house," she said quietly, "you'll have tea." The man in the expensive suit, the one who had spoken, the one whose eyes said he had done this before and found it tedious, watched her with the careful attention of someone recalibrating. "Mrs. Faith, we only need one thing." "I know what you need," Faith said. She turned, looked at him directly. Her eyes were her daughter's eyes, steady, unreachable, giving nothing away for free. "You've needed it for 28 years. Then you know why we're here." "Yes," Faith said. She set the tea on the table, sat down across from him, folded her hands. "And you know I'm not giving it to you." The man looked at her for a long moment, then he smiled. "That," he said softly, "is exactly what we were afraid of. If you're watching this for the first time, welcome, and go watch episode 1 first. The link is in the description. It will make everything you're about to feel hit twice as hard. And if you're already here from episode 1, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, drop "I'm ready" in the comments. Because episode 2 picks up exactly where we left you. Let's go. In Seoul, 42 floors above the city, Grace Adeyemi stood at the window and felt, for the first time in 6 months, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The city was gold and dark below them. Ji-hoon's hand was still warm from touching her face. Neither of them had moved. Neither of them had spoken. The silence between them was the kind that felt like something being built rather than something missing. Grace was not thinking about the salary that had taken 6 months to arrive. She was not thinking about visa paperwork or instant noodles or the notebook of calculations that never added up. She was not performing okayness for anyone. She was simply here, in this room, with this man, letting something that had been running since the day she arrived in Seoul finally slow down. Ji-hoon was watching her the way he watched everything, completely, without dividing his attention, but there was something different in it now, something that had no professional category, something that had stopped pretending to be anything other than what it was. "You should eat," he said quietly. "You haven't eaten since this morning. You noticed that." "I notice everything about you," he said, simply, like it was a fact he had stopped trying to make less than it was. "I have since the first day." Grace felt that land somewhere it wouldn't leave. She turned back to the window, Seoul below them, enormous, indifferent, beautiful. "I used to stand at the window of my apartment," she said softly, "and tell myself this was temporary, that I would go home eventually and none of this would have mattered." "And now?" Ji-hoon asked. Grace was quiet for a moment. "Now I can't remember what I meant by home." Ji-hoon said nothing, but he moved, slightly, barely, closer to where she was standing. Not touching, just present. The way he was always present, the way she had stopped pretending she didn't feel. Behind them, Grace's phone screen lit up on the desk. Unknown number, a message, 4 words. "Your mother needs you." Grace read it. Her chest tightened. She turned and held the phone out to Ji-hoon without speaking. He looked at the screen. Something moved across his face. Not surprise, not concern, recognition. The specific recognition of a man who knows exactly what he is looking at and wishes he didn't. "This number," he said carefully. "It's from my father's old network, an internal channel that officially no longer exists. Whoever sent this has access to infrastructure that should have died 4 years ago. This has been planned, carefully." "My mother," Grace said. "Yes." Ji-hoon picked up his own phone. 1 call. The person picked up before the second ring. He spoke quietly, precisely, and Grace watched him move through this the way she had watched him do everything. Completely. Without hesitation, with the particular efficiency of a man whose world responded to him like a body responding to its own nervous system. He hung up. 3 of my people are on a flight to Lagos in 20 minutes, he said. Grace looked at him, at the ease of it, at the specific, complicated feeling of watching the man she was falling for move through his world with a terrifying, practiced calm she could not entirely pretend she didn't know was there. "Is she safe?" Grace asked. "She will be, in approximately 4 hours. "That's not the same as yes." "No," he said. "It isn't." He did not dress it up. He did not make it smaller than it was. He looked at her steadily and told her the truth, and Grace felt, underneath the fear, the specific weight of being with someone who would not manage her feelings on her behalf. She called Faith. Faith picked up on the second ring. Always. Her voice was completely calm. Not performed calm, the real kind. The kind that came from a woman who had been preparing for a specific phone call for 28 years and was not going to waste it on panic. "I'm all right," Faith said before Grace could speak. "They came. They left. They'll be back." "Who sent them?" Faith was quiet for a moment. "Someone your Ji-hun will know the name of. Ask him. He'll tell you the truth. He's been telling you the truth since the beginning, even when it cost him something. That matters." "Grace." Grace looked at Ji-hun across the room. "Park Sung-jin," Ji-hun said quietly. He had been listening. He did not pretend otherwise. "Yes," Faith said on the phone. "Who is he?" Grace asked. Ji-hun sat down, not behind the desk, beside her, the distance between them deliberate and small, and he told her. Park Sung-jin had funded the original Kwon network before it had a name. It was before Ji-hun's father had a conglomerate or a reputation or anything that looked legitimate from a distance. He was the money behind the beginning, silent, patient, expecting returns that were never fully paid. He considered himself a partner. Kwon Dae-jung considered him a creditor he had outgrown. The tension between them was the subtext of every major decision the network made for 20 years. When Kwon Dae-jung died, he left Ji-hun the empire. But he did not leave Ji-hun Park Sung-jin's debt. That debt transferred automatically. "How much?" Grace asked. "It was never money," Ji-hun said. "It was always information. My father had evidence of Park Sung-jin's operations going back to the 70s. Evidence that could end him completely. Park Sung-jin has been trying to retrieve it since my father died." "The USB drive," Grace said slowly. "Yes. Faith has it. She has always had it." Grace absorbed this. Me thought about her mother in a small house in Lagos sitting across from 3 men. Thought about the specific courage of a woman who held the most dangerous thing in East Asia in a cloth pouch at the bottom of a box and sent it to her daughter in Seoul without explaining what it was. "Grace," Faith said on the phone, still there, still listening. "Yes. The USB drive is not hidden. I sent it to you 6 months ago. It's been in your apartment the entire time, in the box from home. At the very bottom, inside a small cloth pouch." Grace went very still. "You sent it with me. You didn't tell me what it was." "I sent it with whoever you became," Faith said softly. "I always trusted her." Grace closed her eyes. Behind them, her mother's voice. Ji-hun beside her, watching her face with the expression of a man who understood, completely, what it meant to carry something your parents gave you without explanation and find out years later that they believed in you enough to hand you the most dangerous thing they owned. "I'm going to get it," Grace said. "I know," Faith said. "Go." They went to Grace's apartment. Ji-hun went with her. She didn't ask him to. He didn't ask permission. He simply went and she didn't stop him, and neither of them made it a conversation because it didn't need to be one. It was the first time he had been somewhere that was entirely hers. He stood in it, this small space, the size of her mother's sitting room, the instant noodles still in the cupboard, the notebook of calculations still on the counter. And something moved across his face that he didn't try to hide. Something that looked like the particular ache of understanding, fully and finally, what someone had been carrying while you weren't looking. Grace went to the box. Wrapper fabric. This ground crayfish, photographs. At the very bottom, inside a small cloth pouch she had set aside without opening, a USB drive. Thin, old, the kind made in the early 2000s. She held it in her palm. It was lighter than 28 years should feel. Ji-hun crossed the room and stood beside her. He looked at it in her hand. Then he reached across, not to take it from her, but to hold it with her. His hand over hers. Both of them holding the thing that had started all of this before either of them could speak. "We're going to end this," he said. "Together. Not because of what our fathers arranged, because we choose to." Grace looked at him. At this man who had chosen her before he knew her, who had come to see if she was real and been undone by the fact that she was, who was holding her hand over the most dangerous object either of them had ever touched. "Together," she said. Then her phone rang. Benjamin's name on the screen. "I'm already in Seoul," he said. His voice was not threatening. It was frightened, which was worse. "I need to see you. There are things about 1997 that your mother doesn't know I know, and things I know about Park Sung-jin that can end this, but only if you hear them from me first." Grace looked at Ji-hun. Ji-hun nodded once. "Where are you?" Grace asked. Benjamin was in a coffee shop 2 streets from Kang Industries. He sitting with both hands visible on the table like a man who knew he was being watched and wanted to make clear he was not a threat. Ji-hun came with Grace. Benjamin looked at him across the table, and something passed between them. The specific recognition of 2 people who existed in the same world and had been carefully not occupying the same room. "I'm not your enemy," Benjamin said to Ji-hun. "I know," Ji-hun said. "Talk." Benjamin talked. In 1996, when Kwon Dae-jung came to Lagos, Benjamin was not simply a man who controlled import routes. He was a man already in debt to Park Sung-jin himself through a separate, older arrangement. When Kwon Dae-jung offered him a deal, Benjamin saw a way out. He facilitated everything. Faith's introduction to the network, the liaison arrangement, the agreement that bound 2 families across an ocean. What Benjamin did not know, what he only found out years later, was that Park Sung-jin had arranged the entire Lagos introduction himself, had pointed Kwon Dae-jung toward Benjamin deliberately, had orchestrated the whole architecture of the 1996 deal because he needed someone inside the Kwon network with access to the evidence files. Benjamin was supposed to be that someone. He never did it. "Why not?" Grace asked. Benjamin looked at her. At his niece, Faith's daughter, grown and sharp and sitting across from him in Seoul, looking exactly like the woman who once packed a bag in the middle of the night and walked away from everything to protect this child. "Because I met you," he said quietly. "You were 3 days old. And I looked at you and I thought, if I do this, if I help them take what they want, she grows up inside something she can never leave. The same way I couldn't leave. I chose badly in 1996. I tried to choose better after." Benjamin slid a document across the table. His own testimony, written, signed, dated, witnessed, everything he knew about Park Sung-jin's operations. Everything he had been carrying alone for 28 years that he was now choosing to put down. "This won't end him on its own," Benjamin said, "but combined with what Faith has, it will." Grace looked at the document, then at Ji-hun. Ji-hun looked at Benjamin with the expression of a man recalibrating everything he thought he understood about a person. "Why now?" Ji-hun asked. "Because she came to Seoul," Benjamin said simply, "and because you let her through, and because some debts are worth paying even when it's late." Ji-hun's phone rang. He looked at the screen. He answered. Listened for 45 seconds. Said nothing. Hung up. "Park Sung-jin," Ji-hun said. "He knows about the immunity negotiation. He knows Benjamin is here. He's given us until tomorrow morning to return the drive through Faith, or he exposes the immunity case to every network my father ever touched." "Can he do that?" Grace asked. "Yes." "Will it work?" Ji-hun looked at her steadily. "Not if we move faster than he expects." They went back to the 42nd floor. Seo Yeon was waiting in the corridor outside Ji-hun's office. Not hostile, not composed in the way that was its own kind of weapon, simply present. She looked at Grace, and something in her expression had changed since the last time they stood in a corridor together. Something resolved, something that had made a decision and was done deliberating. She held out an envelope. "For Ji-hoon, from my family. We were approached by Park Sung-jin last week. He offered us Ji-hoon's position in the network in exchange for providing information about you." She looked at Grace directly. "We declined. This is our formal documentation of the approach. Dates, amounts offered, everything. It can be used as evidence." Grace looked at her. "Why are you doing this?" Seo-yeon looked at her steadily, something honest and a little painful moving behind her eyes. "Because I have known Ji-hoon for 10 years, she said, "and I have never once seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. That deserves protecting." She turned and walked away without another word. Grace watched her go, held the envelope, felt the specific complexity of gratitude toward someone she had expected to be her enemy. Inside the office, they built the case. The USB drive, Benjamin's testimony, Seo Yeon's family documentation, Ji-hoon's 2 years of immunity negotiation material. Separately, each piece was significant. Together, they were devastating. Park Sung-jin's entire operation, every network, every name, every transaction going back to the 70s, laid out in a form no prosecutor could ignore and no lawyer could dismantle. Ji-hoon contacted the prosecutor directly. Full acceleration. Everything compressed into hours. Grace sat beside him through every call, every decision, every moment where the empire his father built took one more irreversible step toward its end. She did not look away from any of it. She watched Ji-hoon dismantle 20 years of carefully constructed darkness with the same steady precision he brought to everything, and felt something in her chest expand in a way she was done pretending wasn't exactly what it was. At 2 a.m., the calls stopped. The documents were filed. The prosecutor's office was moving. Ji-hoon's immunity was confirmed. In writing, in the hands of people Park Sung-jin could not reach. Benjamin was in a safe location. My Faith had 3 of Ji-hoon's people in her house in Lagos and had, according to the most recent check-in, made them all jollof rice and told them to stop standing by the door because they were making the neighbors nervous. Grace laughed when Ji-hoon told her that. It was the first time she had laughed all day. The office was empty except for them, sole dark and quiet below the window. Ji-hoon at his desk, jacket off for the first time Grace had ever seen, all looking like a man who had just put down something he had been carrying for a very long time and wasn't entirely sure yet how to stand without the weight of it. "How do you feel?" Grace asked. He considered the question seriously, the way he considered everything. "Like something is over," he said, "and something else is, I don't have a word for it yet." "Beginning," Grace said. He looked at her. "Yes," he said quietly. "That." She crossed the room and sat beside him, not behind the desk, beside it, the way she had been slowly, without announcing it, moving closer to wherever he was. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Yes. When I walked into this office the first time, with my calculation sheet and my best blazer, I was so angry and so tired, and I had been performing okayness for so long that I couldn't remember what I actually felt underneath it anymore." Ji-hoon listened. Completely. "And then you smiled," Grace said. "Not the dangerous one, the small one, the one that reached your eyes, and I thought, I need to never think about that again." Ji-hoon's expression did something complicated and tender. "How did that work out?" he asked quietly. "Terribly," Grace said. He laughed, small, real, the laugh of a man who didn't do it often enough. Grace felt it like something warming. Then his phone buzzed. A message from his investigator. Park Sung-jin had left his hotel. Tracked to Incheon Airport, leaving Seoul, not fleeing, retreating. The careful, strategic withdrawal of a man who knew when a position was no longer tenable. One final message sent to Ji-hoon's number before boarding. Ji-hoon read it, showed it to Grace. Your father would have been proud of her. He always said she would be the one. Grace read it twice. He was talking about me, she said softly. Yes. He wrote my name before I existed because he believed I would be the person who could do this. Yes, Ji-hoon said. But you didn't do it because of what he believed. You did it because of who you are. Grace looked at him, felt those words settle in the same careful place where she kept things that mattered. She called Faith. It was 3 a.m. in Seoul. Faith picked up on the second ring. It's done, Grace said. Faith was quiet for a long moment. Tell me, she said. And Grace told her everything. The USB drive, Benjamin, SEO Yeon, the prosecutor, Ji-hoon's immunity, Park Sung-jin's retreat, all of it. She talked for 20 minutes, and Faith listened without interrupting, and Grace could hear her mother breathing on the other end, steady and deep, the breathing of a woman setting down something very heavy after a very long walk. Mummy, are you all right? I am, Faith said. I have been waiting to be all right for 28 years. It feels exactly like I thought it would. What does it feel like? Like I can stop now, Faith said softly. Like you don't need me to carry it anymore. Grace pressed her free hand flat against the desk, the way she always did when she was holding something together. She was not holding anything together right now. She was simply feeling it. Come to Seoul, Grace said. When you're ready, come and see it. Is there something worth seeing? Faith asked. And Grace could hear the smile in her voice, open, unguarded, the smile from the photograph. Grace looked across the room at Ji-hoon, watching her from the window with Seoul behind him, and that expression on his face that she had been collecting since the first day. Yes, Grace said softly, there is. 3 days passed. They were the quietest 3 days Grace had spent in Seoul. Not empty quiet, full quiet. The kind that came after something loud and long had finally stopped, and your ears were still adjusting to the absence of the noise. She went to work. Her office had been upgraded without her asking. There was a plant on her desk that wasn't there before, and she suspected Min-ji but didn't ask. Mr. Kang was gone, quietly and permanently, in the way things in Ji-hoon's world ended quietly and permanently. Grace did not miss him. She ate actual food, 3 meals a day. She bought the good soap. Ji-hoon appeared in her days in ways that were not dramatic. He sent her lunch on Tuesday from the Korean restaurant on the corner because she had mentioned once, briefly, almost in passing, that she had been wanting to try it. He appeared in her elevator on Wednesday evening with no explanation and rode down 12 floors in comfortable silence and said as the doors opened, "The restaurant on the 3rd floor does a Nigerian pepper soup that isn't terrible." Grace looked at him. You researched Nigerian pepper soup. He looked ahead. I researched a lot of things. She laughed the whole way through the lobby. On Thursday, he took her to the Han River. Just that. Just the river, in the early evening, with the city glittering on the water and the autumn air doing something beautiful to the light. They walked without a destination. Grace thought about the skyline in the photograph, her mother young and laughing with this city behind her, and felt, instead of the grief she expected, something quieter, something like continuity, like the thread that started in 1997 arriving not at a wound but at something whole. My mother used to walk here, she said. I know, Ji-hoon said. Does that feel strange to you? He considered it honestly the way he always did. It feels like something that was broken for a long time, he said, being put back together in a way the original pieces didn't expect. Grace looked at him. That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said. I have a low bar, he said. You really do, she said, and took his hand. He looked down at their joined hands with the expression of a man who had wanted something for long enough that having it still surprised him. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Benjamin called Grace from Lagos 2 days later. He had returned home, his testimony formally submitted. He sounded lighter. Your mother, he said. She's not angry, Benjamin. She should be, he said quietly. Maybe, Grace said, but she isn't. She said to tell you, the jollof at the airport was always better on your side of the family and she hasn't forgotten and you owe her a pot. Benjamin laughed, a surprised sound, like something he wasn't expecting to do today. "Tell her I'll make it myself," he said. Grace smiled. "I'll tell her." That evening, Faith called to say she had booked her flight. 2 weeks. She would be in Seoul for 2 weeks. Grace wrote it in the notebook that used to hold the calculations, the notebook of numbers that never added up, and felt the specific satisfaction of a page finally being turned. She told Ji-hun that evening. "I'd like to meet her," he said. "She already knows everything about you," Grace said. "That's terrifying," he said. "It should be. She's been watching you for 2 years. Ji-hun absorbed this. She approved of me before you did." "She approved of who you were trying to become," Grace said. "I approved of who you already were. She said that's the difference." Ji-hun looked at her for a long moment. "She sounds remarkable," he said quietly. "She is," Grace said. "You'll see." 2 weeks later, Faith landed at Incheon Airport. Grace was at the arrivals gate 40 minutes early. She didn't acknowledge this to herself. Nothing, she simply arrived 40 minutes early and stood where she could see the doors and watched every face that came through until the one she was looking for appeared. Faith walked through the arrivals gate with one suitcase and the particular posture of a woman who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had recently put it down, straighter than Grace expected, lighter in her movements, and her eyes moving over the arrivals hall with the alert attention of someone seeing a city they once knew in a different life. She saw Grace. They walked toward each other, not running, neither of them running, because they were Faith and Grace Adeyemi, and they did not run toward things when they could walk toward them with full dignity. And then they were holding each other in the middle of Incheon Airport, with people flowing around them, and neither of them caring even slightly. "You look thin," Faith said into Grace's shoulder. "I've been eating properly for 2 weeks," Grace said. "You look thin," Faith repeated firmly. Grace laughed. It came out a little wet. They stood like that for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then Faith pulled back and held Grace's face in both hands, the way she had the morning Grace left Lagos at the departure gate, looking at her for a long time without speaking. She looked at her now the same way. "You're happy," Faith said, not a question. "Yes," Grace said. "It looks good on you," Faith said softly. "It looks like something you chose." "It is," Grace said. "Everything about it." Faith nodded once, straightened her jacket. "Where is he?" she asked. Grace smiled. "He's waiting outside. He didn't want to, and I'm quoting him directly, impose on this moment." Faith raised an eyebrow. "He used the word impose?" "He did." Faith made a sound that could mean anything and meant everything. They walked out together. Ji-hun was standing at a respectful distance from the arrivals exit, not hovering, not performing, simply present in the way he was always present, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the doors. He saw them and straightened slightly, not from nerves, but from the specific alertness of a man for whom this moment mattered considerably. Faith looked at him. He looked at her. 20 meters between them and a silence that contained 28 years of history and 2 families and one impossible, improbable, entirely real thing that had grown between their children without any help from any arrangement. Faith walked toward him. Ji-hun met her halfway. "Mrs. Faith," Ji-hun said quietly. "Ji-hun," Faith said, "your father was many things, not all of them good." "I know," Ji-hun said, "but he loved her," Faith said, meaning Grace. "In his way. In whatever way he was capable of." "I know," Ji-hun said again. "I am not my father," Faith said quietly, "and you are not yours." Something moved across Ji-hun's face, something that had needed to be said to him by exactly this person for a very long time. "No," he said, "we're not." Faith looked at him for one more long moment. "Good," she said simply. "Then let's go and eat something. Grace tells me you know a place with pepper soup." Ji-hun looked at Grace over Faith's shoulder. As Grace was standing 10 meters away with her hand over her mouth trying not to visibly cry in an airport arrivals hall and failing moderately. He looked back at Faith. "I do," he said, and offered his arm. Faith took it without hesitation, and they walked toward the exit together. This woman who had fled Seoul in the middle of the night 28 years ago with an infant and a USB drive and more courage than anyone gave her credit for. And this man who had inherited an empire he never wanted and spent 2 years dismantling it quietly from the inside because he wanted something clean, walking side by side through Incheon Airport like two people who had both, finally, arrived somewhere they could stop. Grace picked up her mother's suitcase and followed. That evening, the three of them sat at a table by the window of a restaurant 3 streets from Kang Industries. Seoul moved past outside. My Faith ate her pepper soup and made a face that meant it was acceptable and told the waiter it was acceptable in a tone that meant it was actually very good. Ji-hun watched Grace watch her mother, and his expression was the one Grace had been collecting since the first day. Fuller now, complete in a way it wasn't before. Later, when Faith had been taken to her hotel by Ji-hun's driver, and the city had gone quiet and late, Grace and Ji-hun stood at the window of the 42nd floor. Same window, same city, different everything. "She likes you," Grace said. "She tolerated me," Ji-hun said. "For Faith, that's the same thing at first." "Grace, yes. 6 months ago, you walked into this office with a calculation sheet and your best blazer and told me you didn't know if my word was worth anything." "I remember," Grace said. "I want to tell you something now, and I want you to know that I mean it the way I mean everything, completely, without dividing it." Grace turned to look at him. Ji-hun looked back at her. This man who found her name in a file and crossed a city to see if she was real and had been undone, quietly and completely and permanently, by the fact that she was. "I would choose this," he said quietly. "Without the arrangement, without the files, without any of it. I would choose exactly this." Grace looked at him for a long moment. Then she closed the distance between them, not waiting, not performing, not managing how she felt about it. And she kissed him. Ji-hun went very still for exactly 1 second. Then he kissed her back, like a man who had been waiting for something he was afraid to want, and had finally, completely, stopped being afraid. Outside the window, Seoul moved on, enormous, indifferent, and tonight somehow beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the city. Inside the room, but something that started in 1997 with 2 people making desperate decisions in the dark, ended, not in debt, not in arrangement, not in anything that was planned, in this. Just this. 2 people. 1 window. A city that kept their parents' secrets for 28 years, and finally, tonight, had nothing left to hold. And somewhere in a hotel 3 streets away, my Faith Adeyemi sat by her window and looked out at Seoul, this city she once fled in the middle of the night, and felt it differently than she ever thought she would. Not like somewhere she escaped, like somewhere she had finally been allowed to return to. She picked up her phone, typed 1 message to Grace, sent it. 3 words, "I'm home too." She set the phone down, folded her hands, and smiled. Stace, if Grace and Ji-hun found their way into that place in your chest where the real stories go, you know what to do. Like this video, share it with someone who needs a love story today, and subscribe so you never miss what we bring next. And if you want to know what happens after this window, after this city, after everything their parents built finally comes to rest, tell us in the comments. We read every single one.